Hello, and welcome to Mission 5, Lesson 29, where our student objective for today is to estimate sums and differences using benchmark numbers. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be rounding. Okay, so we're going to be estimating by rounding with fractions and then adding or subtracting using those. So let's take a look at what one of these problems might look like. This problem asks us to estimate 3 3/5 minus 1 7/8 by rounding to the nearest half and then solving it. So when we're rounding fractions or mixed numbers, what we need to think of is our benchmarks of 0, 1/2, or another whole. All right, because that's going to help us round a fraction or a mixed number to either a whole number or a whole number with a half. Okay, so let's take a look. For instance, in this one we're gonna have 3 3/5 minus 1 7/8. So we're gonna start off with the 3 3/5 right here. Okay, now what I'm gonna ask myself is this. Here are my choices. Is 3 3/5, is it closest to 3? Is it closest to 3.5? Or is it closest to 4? Okay, so we're going to round. So that's what we mean when we estimate here. We're going to round to either 3, 3.5, or 4. So that's why it tells us we're rounding to the nearest half right there. Okay, so you have to think 3 3/5. Okay, I'm going to ask myself 3/5. Is 3/5 closest to 3? There. Is 3 3/5 closest to 3.5? Or 3 3/5 closest to 4? So if I look at 3/5, let's think of 3/5 in terms of a half. Is 3/5 more or less than a half? Well, it's more than a half, right? Because half of 5 is 2.5 actually. It's 2.5/5, I guess would be half of fifths. So my choices are then either going to be, is it closer to 3.5 or 4? Because we know since it's higher than a half, it's not going to round back down to 3. It's not going to do that. It's either going to round to 3.5 or to 4. Well, if we look at it like this, that around half of 5 is 2.5, well, 3 is just a little more than that. 3 is just a little more than that. And if it was 3 4/5, I would say we could go ahead and round it up to 4. But in this case, 3 3/5, that's actually going to be closest to 3.5. All right, so we're going to round 3 3/5 to 3.5. Now I'm going to look at the same thing. Let me erase some of this here with 1 7/8. Okay, so I know that there's going to be 3.5. I just rounded it to. And now we're going to look at 1 7/8. And I'm going to round 1 7/8. My choices are either going to be then 1, 1.5, or 2 wholes. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to look at 7/8, and is 7/8 more or less than a half? 7/8 is more than a half because half in eighths would be 4/8. Okay, so is it right around a half then? Or is it pretty close to 2? Well, in this case, if we have 7/8, 7/8 is just one little piece away from being 2 wholes. So I'm going to round to 2 in this case. So I'm going to round 1 7/8 to 2 wholes. Right? So the real equation I'm doing is 3.5 minus 2. And what is that about? You notice here that it's not an equal sign. That is a congruent sign, actually. That means about how much. Okay, and so it's not going to be an exact number. It wants to know, hey, whenever you see that kind of wavy equal sign, it means about how much is it. So you're going to round or estimate. So 3.5 minus 2, what would 3.5 minus 2 be? Well, 3.5 minus 2 would be 1.5. Because I have 3 wholes, I take away 2 of them, that's 1. And I still have the half. So 3 3/5 minus 1 7/8 is about 1 1/2. And there you go. So solving today, you're either going to have to subtract or add like 2 mixed numbers, okay, with So you have a fraction in there. And then you're going to look at, okay, use your benchmarks of a half. And we're going to say, okay, is it closest to the half? Is it closest to the number before? So for instance, if it was 4 1/4, well, 4 1/4, we'd want to go ahead and just round it down to 4 because we're not even at half yet. Okay. And we're going to go that route. So again, do you round it down? Do you round it to the half, or do you round it up to the next number? And then just solve the addition or subtraction problem. And that's what we are doing for this lesson. So you're just going to have to use some common sense here. You're going to have to think about your benchmarks and round to that nearest number.